Hi, and welcome once again to Ivy English.
I'm Karen. April Fools.
Okay, in reality, being serious now, I'm Chris.
You caught me off guard. I'm Chris Gorski, and that's Karen. And of course, today we are talking about
April Fool's Day.
That's right. So we have interesting facts about April Fool's Day.
Although it's already passed because it's already April 5th.
Yeah, I wonder how constrained. What's the value in being constrained to just one day of jokes? It's more. We're going to talk today about what's effective in giving pranks, what's right to do, what's wrong to do. And I'm going to plant my flag right now. I feel like if we had like a week or a month where you can play practical jokes, this would be much better because everyone is ready for April Fool's today.
Well, see, that's why it's effective is because people aren't used to it and they're often not ready, even when they know it's April Fool's.
Maybe it's me. Leading into April 1st, I'm ready. And anything suspicious, I'm like, no. Like instantly the buzzers go off in my mind.
All right. We have to mention what you're wearing today, Chris. All right. We recorded this long before April, and you should know what Chris is wearing today.
Well, if you happen to see a foreigner walking around in a red Santa snowman Christmas jacket with a Santa hat, that's me.
With snowmen and stars all over it.
It's really
very
bright.
Cute.
Yeah, we would use the word gaudy, I would think most of the time.
I wouldn't call it gaudy.
Outside of any other day. If I was wearing this, this is a very loud, gaudy, Gaudy jacket. But for me, I know when people see foreigners, they have certain feelings, opinions, both positive and negative, and that's okay with me. So personally, I try to embrace it. I try to accept that people are looking at me, and I don't try to pretend I'm not a foreigner. I try to affect the opinions of others in a positive way. I try to help others. That's right. Here I am, and I want to make you happy.
And the other adjective you use that's really interesting and worth learning is loud. It's in loud colors. That means they are really, really bright and noticeable.
Yeah, it's designed to stand out.
Which is fine. But now back to April Fool's Day. We'll discuss it more as we read and after we read. I am not crazy about April Fool's Day because sometimes the jokes get too carried away.
I agree. And this is kind of what we're going to talk a little bit about today on the side. What makes a good prank and what makes a bad prank? Because I know when I talk to my students, they always have the worst prank ideas. And I have to kind of teach them about how do you properly prank someone on April Fool's Day.
Because you can make somebody really hurt or angry if you go overboard.
Or cost them a lot of money.
Yeah, that too. All kinds of things. Or maybe a relationship with somebody.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of risk involved. Keep that in mind as we talk to you about April Fool's Day. Our title again is Interesting, maybe not again, I didn't read it the first time, Interesting Facts About April Fool's Day. And this is a two-part article. We're going to hear part one today. And here we go. April Fool's Day, which occurs each April 1st, is a time when many people like to play tricks on people they know. They hope that their friends or relatives will enjoy their harmless pranks so that they can laugh and reveal it was all just a joke. At that point, they might say, April Fools, to let the other person know it was all a prank.
How did this tradition start? There are no clear answers to this question. Only good guesses and theories. Some historians believe that April Fool's Day is linked to the decision to change calendars in the 16th century. The switch from one calendar, known as the Julian calendar, to another, called the Gregorian calendar, fixed the date of the new year on January 1st. However, some regions in France at the time were celebrating it at the beginning of April. According to this theory, not everyone knew about the change of calendars at first, especially those who lived in the countryside. It is said that those people who incorrectly kept celebrating the New Year's around the beginning of spring became known as April Fools.
Others believe that the roots of April Fool's Day go back even further. It is possible, some experts believe, that April Fool's Day is linked to an ancient Roman festival celebrated around the end of March. The celebration included people dressing up in costumes to make fun of others, such as judges and other important people. Whatever its true origins, the tradition has brought a lot of laughter over many centuries. Now, it doesn't sound finished because it's not. We're going to hear part 2 tomorrow. Let's go back and then sort out part 1 first. First of all is our title, Interesting Facts About April Fool's Day. And we've mentioned in a previous show that there is a common idiom now or something that goes around. People will say fun fact, and then they'll tell you something silly. So if you see fun fact, it is literally true that it's a fun fact, but they're probably going to be making fun of themselves or making fun of something. Fun fact, that means here's something really silly that you probably didn't know. That's called a fun fact. An interesting fact reminds me of that. So there's a bunch of things about April Fool's Day that you probably didn't know, and that's what the article is about.
There is a big part of Western humor where you say the opposite of what you truly mean.
Right.
Fun fact, and then you say something really sad or miserable.
Yeah, that's right. Something you think, that's fun?
I think that's it's just the way to share those little tidbits that you normally wouldn't get in a history book, and which personally I appreciate a lot.
That's true. Actually, Chinese have these wild histories, too, where they tell you stuff that's not in the history book. But this definitely, I think, comes from Europe because you really find this culture of sarcasm in, like, France and England.
Oh, yeah.
It's really big there. And they're worse, actually, than Americans. Americans are pretty bad, but the Brits are experts.
I've been trying very, very hard for the past few years to be more sincere. As a young person, I didn't mind being sarcastic. But at a certain point, I was just thinking, I want to be really sincere. I want people to
believe you and take you seriously.
Well, it's not even to be taken seriously. Huh? It's just that I want to genuinely enjoy things. And if it's not cool and other people don't like that, that's okay. And I don't have to. I felt I was using sarcasm as a way to hide things that I enjoyed that weren't necessarily popular. And so I wanted to embrace that. That's like, you know what? It's totally okay to like things that are not popular, things you're not good at. That's all okay. And I just want to be sincere and happy and accepting of who I am as myself. And it was, thinking back, maybe it was a little more mature for my age than I probably, in most other circumstances, I was probably a little immature for my age. But in that moment, like, I like being sincere and wanting to be nice to people and trying to be kind to others.
It's especially important in this culture because people avoid sarcasm so as to avoid offending people. And when I first got here, when I was a student in the 70s, I didn't know that. That was a cultural difference that was off my radar. And I said something, and I don't want to repeat what it was, but the listener went, huh? And then once she says, that was impolite. And then from there, I knew I was being kind of raunchy and sarcastic and unkind, and that was not suitable in this culture.
I very, very much use different kind of humor in English and then in Chinese. If you hear me speaking Chinese, definitely the kinds of jokes I make lean more towards like a cute, silly side. And then in English, I'll go all over the place. Obviously, being more comfortable in my own language, I can be more flexible. But my Chinese humor very much is about being cute and silly.
This really became clear when I was at a book club meeting, and it was a mixture of Taiwanese and all kinds of foreigners, like one French speaker, but mostly English speakers from all over the English-speaking world. That time we had me from the U.S., someone from Canada, someone from the U.K., and someone from Australia. 4 different English-speaking countries. And at that time, before we settled down to our serious discussion, we were making silly, sarcastic jokes. It was just the Anglos and maybe the French speaker who caught what was going on, and the Taiwanese had no idea what was going on.
Humor is truly subjective. It's interesting where something would be hilarious in one culture is stone cold unfunny in another. I find that really fascinating, and I think it's probably really an interesting topic to dive into research. As like if you were a professor and you were spending your research career as on like humor.
Yeah.
Like what is the funniest thing? Like if you could line up the funniest jokes in each culture, what would they be?
I know a Taiwanese professor who studies this.
Really?
Yes. Her topic is humor. And that is really true. And the funny thing was the reason the Taiwanese did not catch on is that when we are delivering this sarcasm in English, we do it with a completely straight face, as though it's serious. And so the Taiwanese thought, well, this is just conversation we're not catching. But we're all making these crazy jokes with a straight face.
Yeah, as humor is subjective.
Okay, so that's a good background. Understand that our humor is quite different. If you go to live in an English-speaking country, it will probably take some adjustment, and you probably won't catch a lot of the things going on at the beginning.
Yeah,
okay?
It's something you just got to get used to.
Yeah, and kind of study to figure out. All right, so interesting facts. Here's our first sentence. April Fool's Day, which occurs each April 1st, is a time when many people like to play tricks on people they know. I think that's a very straightforward sentence, and it should be easy to understand. So when does it fall? On April 1st of every year, and it's a day for people to play jokes on each other. I will add one more thing. This has changed since the pandemic, because since the very first year of the pandemic, that was 2020, that was after it was the end of 2019 that it started.
It's in March, right? When it really hit kind of most places worldwide.
Exactly. And then a lot of people wrote, like in the New York Times, how about if we just cancel April Fools this year? Because people were not in a joking mood.
Yeah.
And they were so scared of all the news coming in, they wouldn't know whether to believe a joke or how to identify it as a joke. So a lot of people said, let's just skip April Fool's Day. It's not fun. Not in this situation.
It was super serious when it first broke. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. I was not aware of that, but yeah, that's probably good. That would have been a good idea.
Yeah, and I think it basically happened. I was certainly not in the mood for it. Okay, our second sentence. They hope that their friends or relatives will enjoy their harmless pranks so that they can laugh and reveal it was all just a joke. Now, from my personal experience, when I was the one who somebody was playing a joke on, sometimes it was really fun. I go, oh, I had no idea. I forgot it was April Fool's Day, or I had no idea, whatever it was. Other times, I was a little mad.
Yeah, so when you're doing a prank, the key word here is a harmless prank. Prank is a word of unclear origin. It's not really clear where it came from at all in history. It just means trick. And the idea is like, you don't want to physically hurt someone or ruin something expensive. Kids love to say like, oh, you throw a bucket of water on a person. But if you have like your laptop or your cell phone in your pocket, you just cost them $1,000. Are you a crazy person?
Yep.
Like anything that would physically harm a person, break their bone, make them think their family was dead, those are not funny jokes.
Anything that will make the person feel really bad is off limits.
That's right. You want to punch up.
Do not be mean.
Yeah.
You should not be mean. All right. So where to draw that line sometimes, it's not always so clear. So the idea is you have some fun. You say, ha, ha, April Fools. At that point, they might say, April Fools, to let the other person know it was all a prank. Now, we've already explained the meaning, but look at this sentence. This is a really good sentence to know. The structure is great. At that point, that means at that time. We don't say at that time. We say at that point. They might say this to let the other person know it was all a prank. Note where we put the all. Everything was just a joke.
How did this tradition start? There are no clear answers to this question, only good guesses and theories.
Now, I'm glad they admit that right at the beginning because both the theories that they offer and what's coming sound a little suspicious to me.
Interesting. I prefer one theory much more than the other, so I'm very much interested in your opinion as we get to them.
Okay, I'm not convinced by either one, but I have no other information. The trouble is when you don't know anything about a topic, you accept whatever information you get. So as humans, we always use the best available information. If you had no information to start with, your best information could be a lie.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the goal of something like history and honestly like science, where your goal in science is always to say, hey, in the past, I was wrong. I have more information and a better idea now.
But unfortunately, it's also often the goal of politicians to take advantage of people's lack of experience and knowledge, put information out there. All they have to do is repeat it many times, and people assume it's true.
Let's continue here. Some historians believe that April Fool's Day is linked to the decision to change calendars in the 16th century.
Now, here we're getting technical, and we're talking about history. Let's keep going.
The switch from one calendar, known as the Julian calendar, to another called the Gregorian calendar fixed the date of the new year on January 1st.
This sentence contains a lot of interesting information because who would have thought that the year would start at any time besides January 1st? But it makes sense because people often thought the new year began around springtime like the Chinese still think.
Yeah, the calendar is an interesting topic to study if you have a bunch of time. There are some interesting changes, and there's a lot of assumptions that are built into our everyday lives that have actually had to been forced on people, and a lot of people refuse that. A fast, interesting fact of this, people in the past believed that you were given an exact number of days to live, kind of how many times your heart will beat, how many times you will breathe before you die. And when the Julian calendar switched to the Gregorian calendar, they had to lose 11 days to set the calendar correctly so that everybody could be on the same time. Now, because people believed they were losing 11 days of their lives, they were pretty upset about this. And they also weren't going to be paid for this. People really thought genuinely they were going to lose time of their life. They were going to lose money, all sorts of ideas. There was a famous kind of maybe apocryphal, not real story of a man that said, I can dance for like 12 days straight. And he started dancing. Then the change of the calendar took place. And the next day he would have been dancing for 12 days and he collected a lot of money. This is also the origin of the phrase, the days of our lives. This is quite an old idea that eventually was adopted into a famous soap opera in the West.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just comes from the idea that people believed I have a number of days in my life. And once that number's gone, I die.
I never knew that. That is so interesting. I'm glad you brought that here. But it reminds me of what I'm reading now, Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio by Pu Songling. And he often expresses this idea that our destiny is fixed. And no matter what you do, your days are fixed. So there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah.
Let's continue.
Continue.
However, some regions in France at that time were celebrating it at the beginning of April, just like you were saying, Karen.
Around springtime.
That's right.
So spring has come, and this is the new year, and that makes sense.
According to this theory, not everyone knew about the change of calendars at first, especially those who lived in the countryside.
They tend to get news a little later, and they maybe take longer to accept new ideas.
It is said that those people who incorrectly kept celebrating the New Year's around the beginning of spring became known as April Fools.
Now, I just don't find that convincing. It may be true.
I agree with you. I don't believe this is particularly believable because, like, if people traditionally celebrated a new year or had a celebration at springtime, why would they suddenly be fools if people just said, hey, we're going to jump it back to January?
And who makes fun of Chinese for having their New Year's around the beginning of spring?
Well, Europeans might. But
I don't think so. I think they think it's kind of quaint and interesting in general. So I'm not that convinced. Our last paragraph, others believe that the roots of April Fool's Day go back even further. So this is already a long time ago. The 16th century is the 1500s, but maybe the origin can be traced back even further. It is possible, some experts believe, that April Fool's Day is linked to an ancient Roman festival celebrated around the end of March.
And this is kind of going right to what you said. And personally, this is the theory I believe. There's a Roman festival known as Hilaria. You might know the word hilarious, which means very funny. This is the same origin. And because April Fool's Day is so close to that vernal equinox, the first day of spring, this kind of ties into what Karen is talking about and what I personally believe. Farmers were king in the past. Now, not literally king, but almost everybody was farming to some degree in the past because otherwise you weren't getting food.
Just the same in Europe as in China.
That's exactly right. And because of that if this was a day that traditionally around a time of celebration, around a time of festival, people were just going to have a good time. To me, this makes the most sense, although it's not conclusive. It could be even more ancient than that.
I think there's a good chance. Could go back to the beginnings of agriculture for all we know.
Right.
Okay, let's continue. The celebration included people dressing up in costumes to make fun of others, such as judges and other important people. Now, a lot of times the people really felt oppressed by authority because they could come around and maybe collect as much tax as they wanted. They were generally corrupt because you had the chance to get extra money and keep it and not report it. It happened all the time in China and in the West, still happens now, I'm sure, in plenty of cases. So this is your way of sort of getting back at them.
Traditionally, in the past, people in power could not be criticized. There are some instances of that happening today. But generally speaking, in the past, making fun of authority was a good way to get yourself in trouble.
Right.
In fact, for much of history, the only person that could really poke fun at a king or a true leader would be the official comedian of the kingdom or whatever place. And we call that person a jester, Jester. And the jester had a very interesting political power that they could and were often encouraged to poke direct fun at family members and even the leader themselves.
That's right. It comes from the word jest, J-E-S-T, which means a joke. E-R is a person who tells jokes. And traditionally, they were dressed up in this cap with little points on it and maybe little bells at the end or little balls and in a very colorful costume. And they would dance around in the court as the king was discussing things with his advisors. And he was usually the only one who would tell the truth. He would make a joke and make it sound absurd and ridiculous, which is why it was allowed. But he was maybe the only one who could tell the truth without getting his head cut off.
Yeah, people with physical deformities, people that were honestly just wretched and disgusting looking were often used as court jesters. There was a king in England, and unfortunately, I don't remember his name. He had a court jester that was his favorite court jester because he could fart on command. I swear
yes,
this is true.
I've heard that one. Yeah. Farts were a big deal back then. There's another story, because we don't have much left. I can tell you a quick story. There was this guy who was in a very formal situation in the court and then bowed down to the king and let a big fart. And he was so shamed. He ran away on the spot and stayed away for years. And he finally thought it was safe to come back. And he comes back into the court and he says, "I'm so glad you're back. And we've all forgotten about the fart." So, yeah. All right. So farting on command is a pretty good skill. Our last sentence, whatever its true origins, the tradition has brought a lot of laughter over many centuries. Now, that is kind of covering up a lot of times when people went overboard and also made other people miserable or hurt people or whatever. It is a risky proposition.
Now, today, we just want to emphasize that a good April Fool's prank should not hurt somebody or damage something. Personally, I think the worst April Fool's prank is, "Hey, I'm pregnant." Because I think that's a really bad one, because there's a lot of people that are trying to have kids and they really want a family. And then it's just like this other person is just squeezing out kids left and right. And I just think I think it's a really mean-spirited one. It usually causes a lot of chaos in families. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, I think I only remember one April Fool's Day prank that I pulled. It was in 7th grade. I thought it was pretty successful. I'd learned it from somebody else. I'll tell you the story tomorrow.
I was so excited to hear it.
You're going to have to tune in tomorrow if you want to hear that story. That's all we have for you today. Tune in tomorrow to hear part 2 of Interesting Facts about April Fool's Day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.